Well, first of all, good morning. Let me just extend my own thank you and welcome to the conference here. What I'm hoping to do in just a short few minutes is give you a bit of context on technology, promising areas of innovation, impact broadly on opportunities, et cetera, and then look forward to the panel discussion. So just a brief word on the Easton Center here. Why don't we advance it one slide. The Easton Center is focused on preparedness of leaders, of our students that come out of the school for a tech-driven world. And that includes being able to spot opportunities, that includes being able to think about competitive landscape, about different business models, et cetera. And again, we're focused on students, faculty, and partnership with industry. If you just look at a very broad level about where is technology historically, you go back to the 80s. The 80s was the era of the PC. That was the first early kind of signs of automation that occurred. Then you had a seminal event in the mid-90s when the internet really started to take off. And all of a sudden you have a connectedness that creates opportunities for companies like Google in search and people that want to connect personally. So you had a broad internet explosion in the mid-90s, early 2000s. Then 2007, seminal event with the introduction of the iPhone. So the iPhone all of a sudden created the mobile opportunity. And there's obviously a very interesting story here about when does a market really take off. When you look at the timing of a market, when you look at adoption rates, what are the things you need to see to say this is going to happen? And what happened in 2007 is you had this confluence of a great device with high-speed networks and content that was fit for purpose for mobile devices. And so you had a whole mobile explosion. That brings us up to today. Now, some people would say we're still in the middle of a smartphone revolution, but more and more now there's a data revolution that's happening. With the amount of data that is being created through e-commerce, through smartphones, through connected devices, et cetera, there's a wealth of information now that can create new products and services and unique applications. So one of the things I always did when I was at Vodafone and later on now in my classes is I always ask myself, what are the promising areas of innovation? What am I most interested about and how is that changing? Now, how do I set the criteria for what I put on this list? I would look at things that have the best value creation potential. Where are they solving big problems for consumers? And also, are they likely to be able to solve problems relatively near term, as opposed to something that's 20 or 30 years out? So I've listed on two slides some of the areas that I think have the most promise, and then what will be the implications of that. So a few things. Number one, fifth-generation networks. These are mobile networks that have speed up to 1 gigabit a second. Are being launched now in the US and slowly in Europe and in Asia. This is going to create kind of the next wave of full mobility that will power autonomous vehicles, that will power fixed broadband applications, et cetera. So very exciting things that are happening there. There's expanded search capabilities. So I heard the CFO of Google speak, it must have been a year or two ago, and I asked him in a plenary like this, what is the most promising area of innovation that you see? And he said to me, search. And I thought he was being somewhat sarcastic. And he was not being sarcastic. He was basically intimating that all of the personalization and contextualization that can come out of data today can create the next level of search experience and relevance. All the work that's going on personalization and contextualization is going to happen in a variety of industries. Virtual reality and augmented reality. To me, this is bringing the digital and the physical world together. So one example there that I always am intrigued with, Alibaba is trialing a virtual department store. With a headset you have on, you could basically see all the different departments in a department store, and with augmented reality, be able to look at what inventory and availability exists and be able to have a complete retail experience. Now, this is a few years away, but that type of application will be transformative in industries, in retail, in entertainment, in a variety of areas. The shared economy, So these are businesses like Uber and Lyft and all of the different business models where you have super focused asset utilization. One party owning and operating a piece of asset, whether it's a home, it's a car, et cetera, and then sharing that amongst others. Internet of Things. The forecast is, and I actually believe the numbers, in the next 10, 20, 30 years, tens of billions of devices will be connected. Wearable devices like we have with Fitbits and Apple Watches, et cetera, cars and autonomous vehicles, homes are being connected, buildings, lights, et cetera, and a wealth of information that's going to come off of that that will allow more and more automation. What are the other things that are happening? Virtual assistants. So if you look on your smartphone and you look at Viv or you look at Siri, more and more intelligence is going in there and more connectedness with third-party applications. So people will be able to make a query on their smartphone and have complete transactions be completed. Large companies that operate big call centers are more and more testing out virtual assistants that look and sound like a call center representative, that can access information inside a call center that, again, will fundamentally transform how businesses get conducted. There are significant employment implications that we'll talk about in that, but there's certainly a lot of innovation going on. Convergence and unbundling. We are living in an environment where there is a dramatic battle going on between tech and media companies. On one side, lots of convergence, as you see with AT&T buying Time Warner. On the other side, a move more and more to unbundle content. Much more of a millennial generation is saying, you don't need to put things together for me. I will buy and use what I want. This started with applications like WeChat and WhatsApp on messaging. It's happening more and more on full-on media now. And the question is, who's going to win that battle? Unbundling, or whether convergence is going to play out or not. Cloud-based services. Some people might say cloud is 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. But if you look at the players that are in this space, they are using data, artificial intelligence, to create new offers that create more and more value for cloud computing. And matter of fact, Google, this is one of their strategies to win against much larger players like Amazon. Final comment is there are still about 3 billion people in the world who don't have internet access. They have smartphones, but they don't have internet access. So when you think about the economic models created by people accessing the internet in those type of numbers, it's significant. If you go to India, there's an operator, a mobile operator there called Reliance. They operate what's called Jio, that's been providing a high-speed mobile network almost for free. Massive uptake, 200 million users in the past year. So what are the implications? And this is my last slide, and hopefully, again, to set up things for the discussion here. Number one, the growing value of data. The use of data that's going to create new applications. And again, think of autonomous vehicles. Think of in healthcare diagnostic capabilities that are going to allow future solutions at a fraction of the cost. And remember, the use of data is not what we might have looked at a few years ago, which is analyzing data and looking historically. It's very much oriented around predicting the future piece. So again, with an autonomous vehicle, knowing that there's some sort of object coming in the way and to be able to power that vehicle with enough data that can be accurate. More and more, there's a threat broadly to middlemen. So people that are in sales and service, with the ability of end users to get information and conduct transactions directly on the internet, it's eliminating a human contact element. And again, that has economic implications, employment implications, but it is an area where there's a lot of innovation that's going on. Immersive experiences, we talked about virtual reality, augmented reality in retail and in entertainment. Again, it creates very interesting experiences without, in many cases, a human interface. Ultra asset free place. So when you think about, again, Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, they're using assets in a very, very efficient manner that creates knock-on benefits for end users in terms of convenience and low price, but it's aggregating assets amongst smaller groups of players. The other piece just to share here is that there is more and more focus here on people that are accessing the internet not via texting and typing, but through voice and video. So the CEO of AT&T Mobility at Mobile World Congress a week or so ago made an interesting comment. He said, the future of mobility is video. The future of video is mobility. So there's a lot more focus on video. There's a lot more focus on voice. When you think about Alexa and you think about Siri, et cetera, the idea of texting and typing is less common. There's also a notable impact on workforce. So at a macro level, employment, but also retraining of employees in a very different environment. And a lot of organizations, especially established enterprises that are being disrupted by young technology companies, have got to think about where are they going to be able to win, what skills do they need inside their organization. So last piece. We forward it one more. Okay, so impact here, good news and bad news, like anything. So GDP growth out of a lot of these areas of innovation is terrific. There's going to be a lot of growth that'll come out of it. Access for individual users, for consumers, whether it be social media, whether it be commerce, et cetera, there's more and more access that people will have. There are major advances that are coming, again, in healthcare, in transportation, in media, all with these technologies that will benefit a lot of people. Remember, there's more and more rivalry between established companies and new ones. And the benefit that young companies have, even though they don't have capital and a lot of history, they have a single purpose. They're built ground up in a digital world to innovate and create new opportunities. That is what makes them so threatening to established enterprises. And established enterprises that don't reflect a lot of these threats go by the wayside. And there isn't a day that goes by that you don't see another piece of news. Sears this week talking about how difficult their retail environment is. The next thing is there's a growing move towards scale. So all of you have seen the FANG collection of tech companies. So this is Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. These companies have created mass value. So a couple of these companies have already eclipsed $1 trillion in market capitalization. It is not random that you have large companies in this area, because you need lots and lots of data. That generally is a scale-oriented activity. So the question is, what happens if you're a younger player amidst this? In Europe, from a regulatory standpoint, many of these companies in the US are being brought to court. They're being brought to court on antitrust issues, and now more and more on privacy-related issues. So the regulatory side is becoming a bigger issue to navigate, and there isn't one size fits all on regulatory views. Europe on privacy has been very, very strict. China has been on the other extreme, and the US is somewhere in between, but navigating these regulatory issues are going to be significant. Last two items, the digital divide. There are a lot of people that still don't have access to the internet that we've talked about. There are people that don't have access to jobs in these areas. And as was alluded in the previous panel, that income divide can create an unstable economic environment. A country cannot operate well without a vibrant middle class. And again, there's been more concentration of roles in one area in tech and less in other areas. Leave you with a couple of factoids. If you look at autonomous vehicles, there are 2 million truck drivers in the US. It's the single largest SIC code. Trucking is probably going to be the first area that goes to an autonomous environment. That could potentially be 2 million people that don't have work. Now, it's going to be over a period of time, but that's just one example of where the threat exists. Final point is, it goes back to the Easton Center. The focus of leaders and all of you is to navigate through all these, is to figure out where the opportunities exist, figure out where the threats exist if you're an established enterprise, figure out how do you support your organization effectively, and how do you work in a regulatory environment that today is becoming somewhat more hostile to technology companies. So lots of interesting issues, and I hope you guys enjoy the panel, which hopefully will get into these issues in more detail. Thank you.